So SNL was back this weekend for their new season here in 2020, and it was a very heavily political show, as we'd expect in an election year, and we expect Saturday Night Live to give us the comedy gold of the political landscape every election cycle, and this was no different. And in this video, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on not only the cold open that was covering the whole debate from this past week, but also a few thoughts and observations I had for the entire show once I watched all the clips online. So the first thing that popped up was the cold open regarding the debates that happened this past week between Democratic nominee Joe Biden and incumbent President Donald Trump. And it was funny because they put a little scroll of wording on the screen before they actually got into the sketch, and it said something to the effect that the debate was fun to watch as long as you don't live in America, and that it might be the only debate we have because now we know that President Trump and First Lady Melania tested positive for coronavirus at the end of the week. And what's interesting about SNL is that, I mean, they are live on Saturday nights, and all this news about Trump's diagnosis was on Friday, so they had to either add, change, remove, edit, whatever at the last minute it appears, and I'm sure that was fun for them. So I think they mentioned that in the weekend update as well, so that was interesting. However, let's get into the actual debate sketch. So it starts with something I actually mentioned in my last video regarding my thoughts on the actual debate, and it's these little short interspersements of whatever the word is of Trump kind of doing things under his breath, and they hit on that perfectly, and I was so happy they got that part of his personality out in the sketch, because those are the things that I like when they pick up on, are the little mannerisms and little quirky things about each character they're trying to portray, and they got that spot on. So I was really happy to see that. It makes me laugh because they exaggerate really well. And then next was when Biden came out. It seemed to be they were portraying him at first and throughout the entire debate portion of their show, sketch, whatever, as the former version of himself, or the version that the media wants to paint him as, not as the Biden who has gaffes and maybe a little mentally on the decline. To me, this kind of highlighted the fact that SNL tries to portray, or at least leans towards portraying, the characters that they impersonate in a way that they want to see them, not necessarily as they are, and it's usually more of through a media lens of what they want to portray agenda-wise and whatnot. So that was clear what was happening here to anyone who is maybe not on the media's side as far as what they choose to put out there and the bias they have. So I thought that was an interesting take, but I'm not really surprised. But one of my favorite parts was actually when they started doing mostly Biden kind of giving his inner thoughts and sharing them out and taking that angle as going further than what Biden has done. And I think it's a very interesting take, and it's actually kind of contradictory to what I just said about the way he came out onto the stage. And I was actually really surprised, because it seems in the past that SNL, and this is kind of my biggest criticism of them in the past, is they tend to lean too much on a political agenda over comedy. But what was really funny about this was they actually kind of made up what they think Joe was really thinking in these situations, meaning getting more mean and a little more kind of cutting. And I think this is their way of trying to put words in Biden's mouth that we may know he wants to say, but doesn't say them himself. So this was kind of an interesting thing to kind of let the true Joe Biden now that we're kind of analyzing his entire past, the true Joe Biden is not really what we've been seeing in the media of late. And this to me was kind of a way for them to joke about and let that side of him out without it come across mean in a real situation with President Trump. So I thought that was interesting. And the one example that was really clear in this sketch was when Biden was telling Trump to shut up, which actually happened in the debate. But Joe Biden in the real debate stopped there. But in Jim Carrey's impression of Joe Biden, he keeps going with the insult. And as I said in my last video, Biden is, when he tries to do those types of things or hit back, it kind of comes across mean, and there's plenty of examples out there, but it appears SNL feels kind of the same way, or they're trying to be fair and paint all the characters they're portraying in many different ways, but of course they do it comedically, so it kind of is a little bit easier to swallow as a viewer or as a voter, if you will. So I thought that was a very interesting take on their end. And then we have appearance by Maya Rudolph, who is playing California Senator Kamala Harris, who happens to be my senator. And she came out and was trying to be like the moderator that's not Chris Wallace, who is the actual moderator, which I thought was an interesting thing because they are trying to play up Kamala as what Kamala describes herself as Mamala, because she's like a stepmom and an aunt, and they're really trying to play up that angle with her. And they also touched on the fact, or acknowledged the fact, that it's pretty much widely known or pretty clear, even if people don't want to admit it, that if Joe Biden wins the election, that it won't be soon before his vice president will be running the show, and Kamala is his vice presidential candidate pick. So they touched on it a little bit, but they didn't get too far into it. So I thought that was actually, like I said, with the whole Joe Biden being mean thing, they seem to be playing the role, SNL is what I'm saying, as putting out the information that the mainstream media doesn't want to seem to touch on, because it's a lot easier to swallow information when it's done in a comedy, humorous way. And I picked up on it. I'm sure a lot of people picked up on it, but I think they were smart for acknowledging the thing that a lot of people are thinking and doing it in a way that kind of is acceptable, if you will, in society. So very interesting take, and I thought it was actually well done. Now, the one thing that I think they misstepped on here, which misstep as far as them and their agenda, because they're part of NBC. Clearly they have a left-leaning, liberal, democratic lean bias, whatever you want to call it. And maybe this was part of them being a little fair, if you will, but they had a segment on the whole white supremacy thing where Chris Wallace asked President Trump to denounce white supremacy, and this part to me fell flat because it was funny, because it was true. And the portrayal of Trump by Alec Baldwin touched on the fact that Donald Trump, at first their impression of him was he was accepting it like, oh, come to Papa, or like that's his wheelhouse. But then they portrayed him as someone who didn't know much about it, denounced them, was kind of distancing themselves from them. And so I would think they would want to portray him as far as Trump, as someone who has supporters that are white supremacists, or that he is a supporter of them, or doesn't denounce them, or whatever. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe because it was so clear that they would probably get in a lot of trouble for saying something like that when it wasn't true. I don't know, but I thought that was a really interesting thing that they kept in. I think that maybe could have been something they cut out. Who knows what their meaning for keeping that was. I guess they just let the audience kind of make up their mind on why they kept it in or not, and made the audience believe what they want to believe. So I don't know. We'll see. But then they got into a part where this is actually, it was actually a good skit, I'm not going to lie. But when Biden takes out a remote and pauses Trump, I will acknowledge that I did realize that it was an Xfinity remote, and I don't know if Xfinity, are they associated with Comcast, NBC? I don't know. Maybe it was just, that's a common remote, so maybe they did that, or it's a product placement. I don't know. But anyways, he got out the remote and paused Trump as he was kind of doing weird things. And I thought it was actually one of the more real moments of the debate, because I think people who are watching the debate, a lot of people, if they weren't like a heavily involved person politically, or they don't follow it too much, they probably did the same and either fast forwarded, or paused or turned the channel on Trump, because he was the one that kind of interrupted most of the time on the debate. And to me, it was one of the main reasons, aside from Chris Wallace, why the debate wasn't that enjoyable to watch. you can say whatever you want about that, but it's probably the most accurate depiction of the debate, considering most people probably changed the channel really quickly on the debate. And Biden actually went into this whole monologue at this point, which I thought was actually pretty good and pretty telling of where Saturday Night Live really feels about Trump, and that this is where they really showed their bias and their agenda, which I expect that going into watching SNL, which is why I pick and choose what I watch with them personally. But I know why it's not as fun sometimes to watch, but he goes into a whole monologue about what would happen if science and karma came together, and they're assuming like that's what Biden was thinking during the debate, and it appears that a few days later that wish that he had, or that whole scenario, came true. I thought those were some interesting things about the first, the cold open, which was the debate. Now I have some thoughts just overall on the entire episode that was interesting. So my initial thought was, well, it seemed like a normal episode to me. A few sketches, of course, they had to touch on coronavirus and have a few people in masks and some jokes. But to me, I think they could have finished the last season, knowing what we know now, of course, but finished the last season without an audience, with just whoever was needed in the building. I think they could have gone through that. And I think, honestly, it was really needed at that time. I know it was kind of hard for comedians to do their thing at the beginning of the whole pandemic situation. And to me, I think SNL would be the one institution that could have gotten away with it, especially that since we had a precedence of 9/11, where I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, only a few days, maybe a week later, they were back doing what they do at SNL. So I think this is a welcomed thing to come back as far as humor and comedy goes, because I think we need it in tough times, even if it's hard to swallow or kind of can be spun as insensitive or not the best timing. I think it's needed. But as I was watching and considering the format and how they can pump in artificial cheers, they don't really cut to the audience except for during the monologue. That was when I was actually concerned. And I was watching all these clips on YouTube, and I actually watched all the clips first, and then I watched the monologue. Didn't really mean to kind of do that, really, or looked up kind of what was going on in the monologue and some thoughts on it. And I'm actually happy I did that, because my previous comment I just made about them, really noticing about the pandemic and blah, 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 blah. Well, they had they panned to the audience during the taping, and it appears it was a packed audience. I was expecting it to be empty or have only a few audience members here and there. It was a packed audience, and they all had masks on. There was no seat empty from what I saw. And I thought it was a really bad move on their part. I know that it's an audience participation type scenario as far as like the taping goes, similar to like a sitcom or a live show or a talk show, where feedback from the audience is a good thing and they thrive on that. But the dichotomy or the contradiction between this and the fact that churches aren't allowed to even do this, even if everyone's wearing masks, and the fact that other events aren't being allowed, but an SNL taping is, I thought it was a really bad look, and I have a feeling that might overshadow all the good and the comedy that was I thought was really good of the rest of the show. So I don't know what they were thinking as far as that goes. So I think that'll be interesting, and it's not a good look, especially that they're in New York City, where they're from, as of this morning and on Sunday, they've been locking down a few other areas again. So I don't know, that was not a good look for them. But as I said, I watched all the clips on YouTube, and I actually thought they did a good job overall, like I've been saying this whole time. And the last few seasons, like I said earlier, has been pretty hard to watch, because to me it wasn't as funny, and in my opinion they missed the mark a lot on the last few seasons, and a lot of times in a row, to where it was kind of like, maybe I won't tune in anymore. But this episode appears to be that they actually hit the mark better than they've had in a few years, in my opinion. And this episode, they seem to have stuck with the essence of the characters that they are trying to imitate or impression do impressions of, however you say that, and then just kind of exaggerated and built on that. And it was clear before that they were more pushing an agenda for political sake rather than for comedy's sake. So I think they did a good job, and I think it was perfect timing for them as far as the news with President Trump regarding his positive diagnosis for coronavirus and when this aired. And I think just that one day of us all kind of putting things into perspective, whether you agree or disagree with what's been happening in response to the virus or about the virus or masks or whatever, I think that one day of us just kind of stopping and putting things in perspective, and people kind of giving him a little bit of a break, if you will. Not everyone, but a lot of people. I think that made it a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable to watch this first episode of SNL. So I thought that was interesting. And then as far as my favorite joke of the night, or my favorite part of the show, was actually during Weekend Update when Colin Jost had a part about how California, state I live in, just passed a law saying that the board of directors needs to be more diverse, and he goes on to joke that is how he got a spot on the board of directors of BET, which is Black Entertainment Television, if I'm not mistaken what it means. And he's saying, I thought it was just funny because I think that was the perfect joke, because the biggest criticism I have of the whole diversity narrative and the whole inclusivity and equity, equality, whatever you want to call it, even though some of those things aren't really compatible, in my opinion, is that it only seems to apply to certain groups. So I thought that was a really, really awesome Weekend Update part of the whole segment. And I think they did a really good job coming back, and it appears the 6 months, from what I've seen, that they were off. They have a lot of material to build off of, and it seems like probably they'll be writing sketches this next week up to the last minute, because who knows what's going to change in the next week given what 2020 has been so far. And it seems to be that we're only going to get crazier. So I want to know what you think. Did you watch SNL, and did you enjoy it, first of all? And what do you think of my thoughts on this? Was I fair? Was I right? Was I wrong? Let me know what you think. And actually, I want to know if this is your first time watching a video of mine, which, by the way, welcome and thank you for watching till the end. Let me know in the comments what you think about, because I talk about bias a lot, and political bias, and calling people out for whatever. Let me know what you think about my thoughts. Are you able to tell, if you haven't watched any other video of mine yet, who I'm leaning towards as far as voting wise and kind of what I believe personally? Because so far in this video, I haven't really come out full on and said like who I'm on the side of, but I want to know if it was clear where my bias stands, and let me know in the comments if so, and what you think my bias is. And I love to go back and forth with people in the comments, so I'll let you know if you're right in the comments, but head down there, let me know. And while you're down there, if you liked what you saw here, one, share this video wherever you feel necessary, whether it's by email, by text message, on your other social media platforms. I would love to, that's to me is the biggest compliment, is when someone shares something I make. So let me know if you do that, and if you felt like it was good enough for you to share. Also, if you liked it a lot, and maybe you don't feel like sharing, or you want to share and do a whole bunch of things, make sure to head down and give this video a thumbs up, because that helps this video a lot in the algorithm here on YouTube, and YouTube just loves it, of course, with comments as well. And last but not least, if you are not subscribed yet, or if this is your first time here and you liked what you saw, make sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell down below to get notified whenever I post. And thank you so much for stopping by, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.